All right, let's dive into a topic that's always had this hold on humanity, this fascination with superpowers.
Pretty captivating, right?
Yeah, and your sources really explore the whole thing, like where the idea came from, how science fiction is kind of blurring with reality these days, and of course, the ethical questions that pop up. Makes
Mm.
you wonder, will we need capes and masks in the future?
Well, maybe not capes, but the future's definitely getting more interesting. The astronomical minute is a great place to start, you know?
Yeah, I liked it.
It's a fun take on how the whole concept of superpowers evolved, and trust me, it's way more engaging than digging through some research paper.
For sure. So, the astronomical minute, they kick things off by taking us way back, like ancient myths.
Oh, yeah?
We're talking Hercules, with that legendary strength. Shiva, the destroyer and rebuilder of worlds. And of course, who could forget Thor, the god of thunder and lightning? But what I found really interesting is that these weren't just those cool campfire stories, right?
Absolutely not. You got to think about it. Ancient civilizations, they faced some crazy challenges. Famine, disease, natural disasters. Attributing these superhuman powers to their gods, it wasn't just for entertainment. It was a way to deal with these really scary, uncontrollable things. They were trying to imagine, like, a force, maybe even a divine one, that could control what felt uncontrollable.
So basically, these myths were how people coped with the very real limitations they faced. They
Exactly.
were dreaming of something beyond themselves, some power to make things better.
Exactly. It's this yearning for power, for control, for something more. It's a common thread in human history.
That's so true.
It's just as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago.
Which brings us to the next stage, right? The
Mm.
superheroes.
Right.
The astronomical minute talks about the golden age of comics. That's
Yeah.
like the late 1930s to the early 1950s. And that's when you have these iconic characters like Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman just explode onto the scene.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how these characters came from the anxieties of their time.
Totally. The Golden Age was a time of massive global change and turmoil.
Oh, yeah.
The Great Depression, World War II, people needed hope, something to believe in. They needed escape and someone to fight for what's right. And then, boom, Superman shows up, an alien with all this power who decides to use it to protect humanity. What a symbol of hope in dark times.
And he's the ultimate immigrant story, too, right?
Right.
Coming from another world and choosing Earth as his home, protecting it. It's pretty powerful, especially given the political climate back then.
And then there's Batman.
Yeah, I love Batman.
No superpowers, but he uses his brain, his strategy, detective skills to fight crime.
Right?
He's like the embodiment of human ingenuity. Like, you don't need to be born with superpowers to make a difference.
Exactly. And we can't forget Wonder Woman,
Of course not.
this Amazonian princess fighting for justice, love, equality. Talk about female empowerment, especially in a time when women were often stuck in traditional roles.
Absolutely. What's cool about the Golden Age is that it wasn't just about escaping reality. It was about reflecting the values, fears, and hopes of society.
Yeah.
They gave people something to believe in, something to strive for, even when things were tough.
So we've gone from ancient myths showing this desire for power to these comic book superheroes who embody those hopes in a more concrete way.
Yeah.
But what the astronomical minute really digs into is how science is actually starting to catch up with all these fictional ideas.
Right. Things that were once pure imagination are becoming more and more possible.
It's crazy. Like flight, for instance. We've gone from Icarus with those wax wings to jetpacks, wingsuits, even personal drones that let people fly.
Yeah,
It's like the dream of flying is finally happening, not through magic, but through technology.
exactly.
But what about super strength? I mean, that's always been a classic superhero thing.
Well, now we have exoskeletons being developed for the military and for medical use. These powered suits can boost human strength and endurance, helping people lift things they never could before, doing tasks that would be impossible for a regular person.
Wait, so you're telling me those Iron Man suits aren't just a Hollywood fantasy anymore?
Not exactly.
We're getting closer to that kind of tech?
Definitely moving in that direction.
Yeah.
And then there's telepathy and telekinesis,
Whoa.
concepts that used to be pure science fiction.
Yeah.
But with all the advances in brain-computer interfaces, things like Neuralink, we're seeing that maybe direct communication between our brains and machines is possible.
Okay, that's where things get a little freaky. Are you saying we might actually control things with our minds someday?
The research is still early,
Right?
but the potential is definitely there. And even invisibility, something that's fascinated storytellers forever, is being explored through material science.
Wow.
Scientists are working on materials that bend light around objects, making them appear invisible.
So we've gone from ancient gods to comic book heroes, and now actual science is blurring the lines between fiction and reality. But the astronomical minute doesn't stop there.
Nope.
They go even deeper into this world of genetic engineering.
That's where things get really revolutionary. We have things like CRISPR now, which lets us do super precise gene editing.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Imagine eliminating genetic disorders or even enhancing abilities at the DNA level.
Yeah, are you saying we could engineer superhumans? Like designer babies with specific powers?
It's a question we have to face.
I can see that.
I mean, in the animal kingdom, we've seen gene manipulation leading to increased strength, agility, even night vision. So the potential is there.
Hmm.
But as the astronomical minute points out, this raises a bunch of ethical questions.
It's exciting and scary at the same time, right? Like on one hand, we could be curing diseases, improving lives, but then on the other hand, it feels like it could all go so wrong. The astronomical minute does a great job of bringing up some of those ethical worries.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope, for sure. Like, imagine a world where only rich people can afford these genetic enhancements.
Oh, wow.
We could end up with a society that's even more divided. You know, you'd have this genetic upper class with enhanced abilities and everyone else just trying to keep up.
It's like that whole designer baby thing, but taken to the extreme.
Right.
Instead of picking eye color or hair color, parents are choosing their kids' abilities, intelligence, athleticism,
Right.
like creating superhumans from scratch.
And then what about coercion or exploitation?
Yeah.
Like athletes pressured into gene editing to win, or soldiers genetically modified to be tougher or more aggressive in war.
Okay, now I'm picturing some dystopian sci-fi movie where everyone's engineered for specific roles,
Yeah.
not exactly the future I want to live in.
And what about the psychological impact?
Hmm.
If we can design our bodies and minds to be perfect, what happens to individuality? Do we lose that diversity of thought, experience, and perspective that makes us human?
It's like we'd be sacrificing what makes us human for some ideal version of perfection. The astronomical minute really gets you thinking about the consequences of this tech, the intended ones and the unintended ones.
It's not about being against science or progress. It's about recognizing that these advancements come with huge responsibility.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a responsibility that goes beyond the scientists. It's on all of us, society as a whole. We need to talk about the ethical implications, have those open conversations before this tech becomes widespread.
It's like we're standing at a crossroads, right? We've got these incredible tools that could solve huge problems, but could also create new ones if we're not careful. It's a lot to take in.
Absolutely. And the astronomical minute doesn't pretend to have all the answers, you know. It's meant to start that conversation, challenge our assumptions, and get us to think critically about the future we're creating.
Thinking about the future, that's a good segue to what the astronomical minute calls the gene editing revolution. It seems like every day there's some new breakthrough in genetic engineering. Can you give us like a quick rundown of what CRISPR is and why it's such a big deal?
Sure. CRISPR, basically, it's this revolutionary gene editing tool that lets scientists make super precise changes to DNA. It's like a molecular scalpel that can cut and paste specific genes, allowing for really targeted changes to an organism's genetic code.
So we're not just identifying genes anymore, we're actually changing them.
Exactly.
What kind of impact is that having on research, like in medicine?
It's completely changing the game.
Wow.
CRISPR could cure genetic diseases that we thought were incurable. Like imagine correcting the genes responsible for cystic fibrosis, Huntington's disease, sickle cell anemia. We could eliminate these conditions from future generations.
That's incredible. It's like we're about to defeat some of humanity's oldest enemies, disease and suffering. But, and I hate to bring this up, but it seems like there's always a but. Can't this same tech be used for not so good things?
You're right, there are ethical concerns. Like I said before, there's the potential for designer babies, selecting traits like intelligence or athleticism. And then there are the unintended consequences.
Right.
We're still learning about how complex the human genome is. Even a tiny change could have unexpected ripple effects.
Like messing with the very building blocks of life.
Yeah,
Powerful, exciting, but also a little scary.
exactly. And that's why these conversations about ethics are so important.
Yeah.
We need to think carefully about the implications before making widespread changes to our genes.
So we've talked about flight, strength, even telepathy and invisibility. And now we're talking about actually editing the blueprint of life itself. It's mind-blowing to think about all the possibilities.
It really is. But that sense of awe, that wonder, is what makes this topic so fascinating. We're at this crazy point in history where science fiction is becoming science fact,
Hmm.
and it's up to us to figure out how to use these tools responsibly.
The Astronomical Minute talks about another mind-blowing tech, neural interfaces like Neuralink. I have to admit, the idea of plugging my brain into a computer is a little freaky.
I got it.
Can you break down what these interfaces are and how they work?
Sure. Neural interfaces are devices that make a direct connection between the brain and a computer or some other electronic device. They work by implanting electrodes in the brain, which can record and stimulate brain activity.
So it's like having a tiny computer chip in your head that can read your thoughts and send signals back to your brain.
In a simplified way, yes. Neuralink specifically, they're developing a really advanced system with these super thin, flexible threads that have thousands of electrodes implanted through a minimally invasive procedure.
Okay, that sounds less scary than I thought.
Yeah.
But why would anyone want to do that? What's the upside?
The potential benefits are huge.
Yeah.
For people with paralysis, neural interfaces could help them move again by letting them control prosthetic limbs or even their own muscles just by thinking. They could also be used to treat things like Parkinson's disease or epilepsy by stimulating specific parts of the brain.
That's amazing. It's like giving people back control over their own bodies and minds. But the Astronomical Minute also talks about some pretty out there stuff, like downloading information directly into our brains or even merging our minds with AI. Is that even remotely possible?
We're not there yet,
Right.
but the research is moving fast. Being able to connect directly with the brain opens up all these new possibilities for communication, learning, even human augmentation.
But isn't there a dark side to this tech? What about mind control or someone hacking into your brain?
Those are valid concerns. Security and privacy are super important with any tech that connects to the brain. We need to make sure these devices are secure and that people's brain data is protected from anyone trying to access or manipulate it.
It's a lot to consider.
It is.
On one hand, this technology could dramatically improve lives, even expand human capabilities.
Right.
But on the other, there are real risks we need to address.
You're absolutely right. It's important to be excited but cautious about these advancements. The Astronomical Minute does a good job of showing both the promise and the potential danger of this new world of human augmentation.
So we've come a long way, from myths and legends to cutting-edge science that's blurring the lines between fiction and reality. It seems like the idea of superhuman abilities isn't just a fantasy anymore.
Not at all.
We're on the edge of a new era where we might be able to enhance our bodies and minds in ways we never imagined.
And that brings us to the biggest question. How do we handle this responsibly? How do we make sure these advancements benefit all of humanity and don't make existing inequalities worse or even create new ones?
It feels like we've just scratched the surface. What were some of the things that really stood out to you from the Astronomical Minute?
I think what struck me most was just how ambitious we are as humans. From those ancient myths to the science we have now, there's always been this drive to push our limits, to explore what we don't know and strive for something more. And with all this new tech, those aspirations are starting to feel within reach.
It's like we're about to redefine what it means to be human. The Astronomical Minute talks about cognitive enhancement, using tech to boost our intelligence, memory, and creativity. Is that something you think is actually possible?
It's definitely a real possibility. We're already seeing progress in brain stimulation techniques that can improve cognitive function. And as we learn more about the brain, the potential for even more advanced cognitive enhancements is only going to grow.
But isn't there a risk of creating a society where only those who can afford these enhancements have access to higher intelligence and creativity? Wouldn't that just make social inequality even worse?
That's a really important point. Access and equity are huge factors when we're talking about tech that could fundamentally change human capabilities. We need to make sure these advancements benefit everyone, not just a select few.
It's like that saying, with great power comes great responsibility. We have to be really careful about how we develop and use these technologies.
Exactly. And it's not just about the tech itself. It's about the values driving its development and use. Do we want a world focused on individual enhancement as the ultimate goal? Or do we prioritize collective well-being and societal progress? Those are big questions we need to tackle.
I think the Astronomical Minute really pushes us to think beyond the traditional idea of superhuman. It's not just about being physically strong or super smart. It's about compassion, empathy, and cooperation, the things that make us uniquely human.
I totally agree. Maybe the real measure of how far we've come as a species isn't how high we can fly or how fast we can think, but how well we treat each other and work together to create a better, more just world for everyone.
So maybe the superpowers we should be aiming for aren't the ones we see in comic books, but the ones that are already inside us are potential for kindness, creativity, and collaboration.
It's a powerful idea. Maybe the greatest superpower is our ability to connect with each other, to understand different points of view, and to build a future that works for all of us.
Well, folks, we've covered a lot in this deep dive, from ancient myths and comic book heroes to cutting-edge science and the ethical questions around human augmentation. It's clear the future is going to be filled with amazing possibilities and challenges.
And as we explore this new territory, it's crucial to have these open, thoughtful discussions about what it all means. We need to look at the potential benefits and risks and make sure these advancements are used in a way that aligns with our values and hopes for the future.
So, to our listener out there, we leave you with this. What kind of future do you want? What superpowers do you think are worth pursuing? And how can we make sure these advancements benefit all of humanity? It's a lot to think about, but it's a conversation we all need to be a part of. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious.